today a very brief summit of Fathom. Today we have Bob Sopko and Devin Baldwin to come and join us, and we may be joined by a few others as well. We're having a bit of reception problems. As I say again, we believe that the metaverse and emerging technologies has fully arrived, but the reality is that we're still having issues with broadband, and maybe that Starlink will be a bit helpful in the near coming future. But until then, Bob and Devin, I want you to introduce yourselves and what you're working on, and then we'll begin. Please, Bob, we'll start with you. You're to my right.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. Been watching GatherVerse and love your little snippets of music between events. Always emboldening and enlivening. So I'm at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and my colleagues. I'm not with the group, but I was in IT for many, many years there. I've been actually at the university for 19 years. We developed the first third-party app on HoloLens called HoloAnatomy. We were very fortunate to be able to sign a very strong contract with Microsoft early, and that ended up being HoloAnatomy, free and open to the public. Then we did another version, which is now licensed to 21 universities, one high school, and we spun it off as a separate company. Many artists were involved in building it as well as developers. One of the interesting things is once that was developed, we moved very, very quickly into working with Boulevard of the Arts out of New York City, Cleveland Museum of Art, to bring a Cambodian exhibit, basically where people couldn't travel to Cambodia, but we replicated an exhibit there. And then we also did a dance number where we had, I think, 50 some headsets where some of the scenery was actually in augmented reality and the dancers were live on stage. So besides being, heavy science, our team just couldn't wait to get into an arts element. That's it for now, and I'll share further later.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Devin?
Hello to the both of you, and hello to the GatherVerse. My name is Devin Baldwin. I am a WebXR developer and educator. I have been within the XR space technically since 2016, but recently dived in headfirst probably 2019. I got into educating through the OSD, that's the Oakland Unified, OUSD, Oakland Unified School District, through contracting through STEM Tank, a program where we take basically underserved youth and provide courses and classes on technology or like digital fabrication, basically different things to get kids' hands on technology, bring them access to that type of thing. And I was able to create my own coursework and my own curriculum concerning or around WebXR, and I've been doing that ever since within the Bay Area, and I relish that work. I'm also a content creator and a producer, and also artist. So I pretty much make up the Fathom aspect of our conversation, giving to the tapestry of it. So.
Indeed, Devin. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bob. Audience, those that are with us with GatherVerse.live, we welcome you. And on our other various streaming social platforms, I want to lay into it, and I want to take us back. Let's go back so that we can go forward, more so to be complementary towards this discussion that we're about to dive into. When we talk about these emerging technologies and these art forms that have been rather persistent in our lives for some time, we've gone through this farming revolution. We've gone through the industrial age revolution. We entered into the 90s with what was called the information age, the extension, if you will, of the internet, this www, this World Wide Web. The thing of consideration is that, excuse me, that we get this information, we received it. And some years later, we entered into here in Silicon, which had global impact, of this bubble, this great big prolific bubble burst, meaning that technology was at such an accelerated fashion because of new information received in startups, but these startups were operating like industrial age platforms. And technology in the industry itself, horizontal, had to render itself and get itself atop on its own feet, which ultimately led us into two things that came up: the Great Recession, in particular here in North America, that had global impact and ramification, but also it entered us into the applications renaissance. iPhone, a man named Steve Jobs came on the stage in 2007 September and said, "Hey, I have this device and it has a thing with applications in it." And we became more familiar with applications. Applications weren't new, they just began to emerge. And then Android and other different platforms followed suit. Excuse me. Going into the applications renaissance, which helped bootstrap, if you will, the global economy, once these applications were created based on the information that was distributed in the 90s and platforms to be able to allow us to receive this information, we began to create these applications. And once these applications came out, that gave us empowerment towards developing more tools, birthed and created and fashioned out of applied sciences, inspired by the arts. Now that's led us into the greatest disruptive period of our time, contemporary to our time. The greatest disruptor being not technology, but the pandemic itself, COVID-19, if you will, where we become more virtual in the past 39 months than we had the past 39 years. We've seen prolific rise of technologies within the eco-habitat of NFTs and crypto assets, blockchain technology, on-chain, off-chain. We've seen this metaverse, this virtual ecosystem of interaction and communication come on the scene. Now we see generative pre-trained transformers that have arrived. And so here we are, right now, coming from the heels of November 2022, when we first saw this type of chat GPT arrive in this capacity, not to mention a Dolly and Midjourney, which has been expressed. But now we see these technologies that have arrived the scene. And we're having this discussion because we know there's writer strikes that are happening. There are artist organizations and graphics artist guilds of sorts globally that are preparing for battle. Not for battle for just royalties and more pay, but battle for sustainability of their whole entire industry complex. That we have become so innovative that in some ways we've innovated ourselves. But what I want to be able to do is not talk about the ramifications and the harsh outcome renderings of what's to come. What I want to delve into in this discussion is to talk about art, design, AI, metaverse, fashion, all of the things at this intersection of humanity. Devin, I have a question for you. When we're looking at art, music, production, as someone that comes from XR, audience that's with us, meaning extended reality is this acronym. But we also have to make mention that when we talk about extended reality, we're not just talking about visualization, are we? Because AI is an extended reality from human intelligentsia itself. But really, when we talk about XR, as has been said, it's the interface of AI, but I think that's a little bit more too low. I think we need to come higher with that. But from your lens and perspective, Devin, when it comes to XR, WebXR, and what you've been building with the arts, and we'll dive into some of the things you've been doing with STEM, what are you seeing at this intersection for the arts and creativity and music with this new arrival, this recent arrival of this emergent and very persistent technology called AI?
Well, to kind of speak on what it is now, but we kind of have to take a step back and say, hey, this is what it was. Well, like you said, what brought upon, you know, all the information we got from the 90s, we went into this application era where people had to download things from their phone. People had to, if you wanted something cool, something powerful, it had to be from an application. It had to be native, if you will. Hence, as technology, WebGL got more powerful, people started really digging and diving into making these web frameworks. The technology got more powerful and more sustainable enough to bring out innovative spaces and create different type of companies that can now service the visions that you have without having to download, without having to go the native route. So for Eighth Wall, it is a great example of that. They've come a long way from when I first was introduced to them. And now their platform is servicing companies all around the world for different aspects. And they're using AI within some of those frameworks to handle mapping or certain tracking mechanisms through the camera. And that's just in one aspect. From my perspective, when we're talking about building virtual worlds from a STEM perspective, utilizing tools like Midjourney. There are also other AI music tools that I use within to create an experience. I, I could produce it myself, but for the sake of STEM and having kids, they necessarily don't want to take that time to produce. If they just want something quick, want some sounds that they can throw into their experience, there are certain AI applications where they can type in and ask for certain sounds. And then those sounds can be inputted, whether it's a tap or just a background music within their scene. Just utilizing certain tools like that. And then Midjourney from a content creation aspect. I may want to mock up something. I may have an idea I want to shoot out and like, you know what? Let me get this background for something. Or I may need a texture and I can type it into Midjourney and then I can use that texture for a material on a 3D model of my scene or the background, or even I could use that picture that I've generated in Midjourney to inspire me or to help guide me towards modeling something that I can put within my scene. So there are lots of different aspects of AI that, integrate very well with this web XR environment. So, yeah.
Indeed. And that would translate towards a very interesting approach to STEM that we've never seen before, doesn't it? When we talk about educating our students, we'll come back to that. Let's put a pin in that. That's a very fascinating consideration. For years, we've been talking about science and technology and engineering and mathematics, if you will, based on what almost is beginning to feel like very archaic and old tools and methodologies and ways to be able to update and accelerate education and under the banner of academia. What does these new tools mean for students? But Bob, let's dive in here when we begin to talk about art and the relatability and its impact of impression. We begin to talk about this intersection that is so finite in its availability because of the cross-pollination comparisons and the pairing of these technologies to these arts. We are still finding out what that actually looks like and what it feels like. What's the given intended interpretation therein of art presented with AI, let alone how it's being manifested within the metaverse itself. From your lens, Bob, with the work that you've been engaged in and that you're currently and presently doing, what does that look like? This weaving, if you will, this delicate dance, this engagement.
Well, as I had mentioned, our group did a deep dive in the STEM area with anatomy and physiology. Something that the human body hasn't changed in a century, right? But the way we present it to folks. So we worked with our anatomy and physiology professor, and there's a lot of artists involved in that, believe it or not, drawing this stuff out and presenting it to people. And she wanted to experiment with it, but she didn't understand how it's going to change anything. But again, presenting it from an artist's eye and the way it was embedded in your brain and the novelness of an XR experience. And this is a number that is just difficult to even share because it's astronomical. It was over a 40% higher retention of the material after a few months compared to a standard group because it was so novel and it was so vibrant. Again, created by artists. And I also, within the art realm, I put developers as artists because they're creators, they're musicians, in my opinion. And then within the Cleveland Museum of Art, which is a highly respected location right next to our campus, we had a Cambodian exhibit that people don't generally travel to Cambodia, right? So we brought artifacts to the people in an AR experience, and it crushed it, absolutely crushed it. People got to see it, and I don't know if you were enticed enough to say, okay, now I want to go see the real thing, right? But again, we work with various artists and again, the broad definition of artists, developers and illustrators, things like that. The Cleveland Institute of Art and Cleveland Institute of Music are also right next door to ours, and those students also take classes with our engineering students in like English and things like that. So we definitely try to populate and cross pattern that. I'm embedded actually into a 50,000 square foot innovation space called thinkbox.case.edu, and 18% of our student employees are Cleveland Institute of Art entities. And without that art realm of it, in the physical realm and also in the digital and the metaverse realm, you've got nothing. It's like, what should I create? Now should I create it? And you've got to have a creative mind to do it.
When you're delivering Cambodia as a follow-up, what is the intention behind that?
It was an effort by the Cleveland Museum of Art. They had some Cambodian artifacts, and they've always had a strong relationship with them. And so they've been there for decades. And it's like, how can we infuse a new way to experience, besides seeing these elements that you may have seen multiple times, dusty old sculptures, things like that. How can we put them in a surrounding of what they were, centuries ago and where these may have existed, right? So to put the scenery around them, so to enhance that museum experience.
Indeed, I find that very interesting is that when we think about some of the intentions for AR and VR is the idea to bring people into experiences. So part of the idea has been to bring people into experiences that they may never have been able to experience, none of us, because it may be related to a specific time period. It could be Victorian era, it could be Edwardian era. And depending on that era, depending on what continent, there are different things happening at different times. And when I also think about the deliverance and in particular of really telepresence is to bring people into environments in real time or in past time, if you will, to allow them the opportunity to experience other people's experiences and to render that out into art form. And I think about the emotional, integration that involves to put that together, the human experience. And Devin, when I think about AI, we think about these platforms like Midjourney and Dolly. Some of the designs that we see are just almost breathtaking. They're beautiful, they're incredible, they're powerful. And I just think psychologically, what happens if we do go with a majorative replacement of now contemporary arts that are distributed out, whether that's under the banner of education or STEM, if you will? What happens when these experiences don't have the native given history, right? Something that Bob just expressed, he talked about the museum. Well, museum serves as a muse for us to look and to consider, but museums also tell a story of history. We have the Topkapi Palace, the Louvre, the Tate Modern, and so many other different powerful museums across the world that really archive in some capacity humanity. And for the MoMAs of the world, if you will, they're expressing something that's so in depth of expression for us to be able to wrap our minds around, if we can, if we will, and to understand from the giver what she or he is wanting us to understand at that present moment. Devin, when we talk about STEM, and we're talking about with your students and with all the other STEM practitioners and teachers of education in the world, because this is a really big deal, when it comes to art and communication, as Bob just said, a 40% retention. That's very high. That means that there's some serious fidelity in that experience, especially when we talk about human factors relating to, in some ways, environmental fidelity and cognitive fidelity of what we're perceiving in these environments. Do you believe that the present tools of what we see with AI, specifically under art and expression, is it serving as a value add in your efforts in teaching your students? And you as the teacher, do you feel like this is the way forward and incorporating that and regimenting that into your given distribution of the material itself to your students of curriculum?
I can definitely say that it has been a useful tool. It has been something to engage them, has been something because it's relevant. They hear about it, they see it on social media, because a lot of my students are in the range of middle school to high school. So they're very much on the phone, very much social media, socially aware of what's happening. So it is a very useful kind of grab because the retention rate, that's what we're really after. So,
Right.
because normally, before I even started diving into this space, once again, for the people who don't know, and I'm just giving a little bit of context. I work in underserved communities. That means these are kids who do not have access to these tools. These are kids who are basically deemed not worthy, like, oh, they're just going to do what they're going to do. So the retention rate is already very low.
Right.
It's already very low. So, what my job is as an educator is to somehow find out how to get them engaged. And speaking to relevant topics such as AI, Midjourney, Chat, GPT, it definitely sparks their interest because they hear about it, they just don't know how to access it. So during class, I'll show them how to go through prompts on Midjourney. They'll create certain things. They'll see it. They'll get excited, And then what what I like for them to do is bring what they've prompted into the virtual space, how we spoke about earlier. But what I also don't want to do too much of, and this is just my personal bias. I'm very much about innovation moving forward, emerging technologies, but I also don't want to innovate ourselves out of the innovation itself. And what I
Sure.
mean by that is using AI so much as a tool that we don't even express ourselves through our natural means. So, as far as with the kids, I encourage them, please do draw, please do express yourself through the arts tangibly first before we dive into this tool that pretty much takes what you're thinking and makes it tangible. But at the same time, and once again, I'm biased because I have a lot of people in the art space here, and I'm very much for the natural artists. I'm very much for the emerging technology and for the innovation. But I like them to have a have a structure and ground in art and knowing how powerful your own human expression is. We live vicariously through the experience that you create with your hands, your words, like your experience. And on an ethical level, some of these AI platforms haven't captured their experience. They don't know. Those models aren't trained on that. So you have to, in a way, figure out how you can utilize these tools to bring your experience to life. Because because ultimately, that's literally what that's literally what Bob did by bringing like what it was like, those artifacts, bringing them to life in their prime, seeing what it was like to be within that environment, really adhering to your senses. What did it sound like? What did it feel like? What did it smell like? Like literally, it's about creating that experience. So, as far as these tools, I use them. I do think it is a very good tool moving forward. I just also feel that we need to ground them in what art is and start them with the humanity aspect of it first before we just rely on this tool.
There's several things that come to mind in expression of that, and it's both something that you and Bob have been talking about, and in great capacity of the human body, the brain, if you will. When we think about education, there's been a diminution of retention of even spelling because spell check has become so prevalent in society. Is that some people that either never knew how to spell well know how to spell well least, and those that knew how to spell well, they've lost a little bit. There's been a bit of attrition when it comes to their capability in spelling um, with their studies on this. And when we think about the human brain experience and sensory, I find that very interesting. There's just so much that comes out. I was at Switzerland a few months ago at a place called Lauterbrunnen Valley in Interlaken. I recommend it for anyone that has afforded the opportunity. I'm certainly grateful to have that opportunity. But as I think about the metaverse and the incredible capability to be able to ray trace and to create these hyper-realistic, immersive simulated environments, and it's only getting better, Even with that said, entering to the metaverse, it would pale in comparison to the actual experience of being in this valley of waterfall and fog formations and ghost waterfalls, or phantom falls they call it, and fields of flowers and cut grass. It would be different in experiencing that because my senses aren't involved when it comes to the metaverse. And try as we might, we're building smellorama and this and that, haptic feedback, but it's not there, and it may never be there yet within at least the next 50 years. My point in bringing this up, we talk about the anatomics, the human body. From my understanding, head cavity, chest cavity, lower abdominal cavity, our extremities. In this world of operating, we're still figuring it out. We are still experiencing new things tangibly. We taste new things periodically. We smell new things periodically, and we feel things we've never felt before, good and for bad. But now we go into this extended reality of the reality that we've known. And in some ways, Bob, I feel like maybe perhaps we've exhausted this reality that we've known all of our lives, if you will. But it seems to me with the extending reality and this augmented reality of, say, what you're working on with respect to Cambodia, these artifacts, part of the intention is for us to be able to use this technology to better appreciate this existence, as opposed to appreciating only the experience of technology that we're interacting with and that we're involved with. In other words, doesn't it seem like this technology intentionally was the means to lead us to something more about understanding this existence that we're attempting yet to still figure out? That there's still so much of a mystery to life itself, and to the world, and to the audience that's with us. We hope that you stay with us in this train of thought, as in some ways we just left the planet. Bob, what are some of your thoughts on that when we talk about the relatability of humanity into the arts?
Well, getting back to, you had a great experience visiting Switzerland and everything else, right? When photographs came out, right, people could engage at. It didn't say I never want to go there. Now I even want to go there more, right? Or seeing a film, or Chris Milk, the empathy machine, right? He
Right.
With XR or VR back in the day.
Right.
The other thing is, we've had these empathy machines storytelling around a campfire forever, right? And people, they get scared, right? It's like somebody tells a ghost story, right? I mean, that's so typical. Kids are like, oh my gosh, I hear noises that I didn't hear before, or you leave a movie and you're crying or laughing hysterically. It touches the humanity of people, and this is another tool in that whole regard. Yes, but the thing is, it just. And we don't know yet. And I told you that tremendous increase in the retention of material. We don't know yet if that's just because it is so novel to the human brain that 5 years from now, when you've taken 10 courses, we're not going to maybe get that delta, right? Because that novelty has disappeared. I don't know. We don't know yet. So, but integrating the arts, like Ed mentioned before, it was fascinating to me because we had some amazing deliverables in a very tough area of anatomy and physiology for a new medical, dental, and nursing school we were building with the Cleveland Clinic. And then as soon as people had an opportunity, they went down to do art. And it was just like, wow, that was just fascinating. And it was kind of like a brief vacation for the mind and their ability to do stuff. And then, by doing something creative in the arts, they could then take those skills back and to do things in the science area more profoundly, right? So yeah, the whole integration, because we're human beings, not human doings, and part of the beings is experiencing all this material.
Right.
So, Devin, I had a quick question, if you don't mind. Why are you not STEAM instead of STEM?
You know what?
Talk them into it.
That's actually a pretty good point. So I only contract through STEM Tech.
Okay.
But there's nothing saying that the Da Vinci Code can't have a STEAM track.
Correct.
Because we very much dive into art a lot.
Yeah.
Whether it's the visual, the sonics of art, pretty much every facet. So I mean, that's a great question.
Absolutely. And I heard that many years ago, and it kind of like took me by surprise. And then it's not been as accepted or discussed as much as I thought it would be. And for those in the audience who don't know what we're talking about, STEM science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We want to incorporate art in that whole category because, and it's kind of interesting. It's kind of stuck in the middle there too, right? So it's kind of like that keystone, right? That's supporting the rest. So that's the kind of way I look at it. So thanks.
I have a question for both of you coming off the heels of that. Let's talk about it for a second. AI, and Devin, you mentioned bias as well. But if it's capable in replacing teachers, especially for, let's say, underserved and served communities, and we say, hey, because we know it, you both are firmly in education, I dab it in as well, there's a lack of teachers right now. It's a big deal. But if there is a way to be able to replace teachers more abundantly and sufficiently, and let's say it comes equipped with soft skill, let's just throw that hypothetical on there as well, so it's not just hard skill development, soft skill. Is that a way to go? Is that a viable option? Or are we missing something or losing something if we attempt to replace our teachers? But at the same time, it feels like it may solve something. What are your thoughts on that?
We already are in some regards. Before, you'd have to have a good friend or mechanic, right? You're fixing something on your car. Now it's like, I'll look it up on YouTube, right? But and also in the skilled technician realm, you could put on an AR headset, and you could have that skilled technician who lives, your buddy who lives in 5 states over, be there with you and point out things. So I think it's going to multiply it, and the smart people will, take, eat from a variety of modalities of how you can learn. So go ahead, Devin.
And I agree with Bob. The smart people will smart. As far as the collaborative aspect of it, the technology is there for that purpose. It's growing, it's innovating for that purpose. But what I will say is that, like I said earlier, let's not innovate ourselves out of the innovation. And one thing that technology can never do is be human. It can appeal to our humanity, but it can never have that human touch. Because with my kids specifically, that concept would work for a lot of kids. But with my kids specifically, I'm doing more counseling than teaching. I'm doing more father figure counseling, mentoring than I am teaching most of the time. So when technology learns how to do that, maybe we'll have something there. Now, maybe you're on to something, but until they can truly capture that aspect of humanity and care and love, there will be no replacement for teachers, for real teachers, for mentors.
Right.
I just don't see that happening.
And we all learn when we study the classics. Are we not being taught by somebody who's not physically there, isn't even alive anymore, been dead for centuries, but yet we're learning from their words and their understanding of the universe.
Right.
Point well made. Xavier Neal, Devin, did we lose you? Okay, a little latency, but Xavier Neal, French billionaire, started a school called School 42, and there were no teachers there. It's infamous for having no teachers. 24/7 access to their students. It's all free. Tip of the hat to Mr. Neal for trying to go out and put a platform out there that did basically hard skill level up, gamified. And a lot of their students got plucked off and went to go work for these technology campuses, but the ones that were hired, they noticed that there was a sufficient amount of churn, and these kids, these young people, and were quitting because they had no soft skill development. It's all 100% hard skill. So I think, Devin, you literally here on Fathom Summit just made the case for not replacing AI for teachers, because I think we tend to forget about the power of counseling and consoling. when it comes to our teachers. I think all of us that have had a good example of a teacher, it wasn't always about the lesson that was given, but it was the care in between. I just don't want to overlook that. I think that's a very powerful thing to say and to express. Um, and this is why I believe we have to, as technologists, we need to listen more to those that will be utilizing our technology. I've been saying it for some time. I feel like with the chat GPTs of the world, the bards, the lambdas, they've created pots and pans, but ultimately they've distributed it to humanity and saying, we need to see what dishes that you're going to prepare and that you're going to make, because we don't have all the use cases available internally into our platforms to be able to tell you everything that you can do with this. And so the giver, the intended person to use this in the room, is not the technologist, it's not the expert, it is the person that's going to be using it more so for her or his application in whatever field that they're in. It brings us to our last question here, is that what does the future look like for this XR state of existence, both Devin and Bob? What does it look like and with this marriage pairing of AI and for our arts? And what would you like to see?
You can go back.
I mean, it's so. In addition, I'm a preliminary judge at South by Southwest Pitch in the XR space, and within that regard, AI. I've been doing it a few years now. AI wasn't really; it's just starting to integrate into some of the XR things. So it's still early, and we've got applications from around the world. I view it, the whole AI component as a tool. As back in the day, we crushed berries to have paint and things like that, right? But now we just don't do that anymore, right? And we use a computer for a lot of things. It's going to be another tool that you pull from, and you're going to be cautious about it. You're going to have to be thoughtful about it, and there's got to be somebody making decisions as to melding a couple different elements together to perform some task, to perform some commerce task or some societal task. The human brain is, it's just so infinitely more complex than AI can do, and then that's it. And I talked to a lot of AI people. A guy who travels the world speaking on this, and he goes, it is just so early, and we just don't know what's going to happen. But what's interesting is that, with ChatGPT and some of these other ones, how across many disciplines it is powerful, and people who are experts in those disciplines have said, this is close, and the thing is, a lot of people are saying it's like ninth grade capabilities right now, not PhD type capabilities. So it'll be an interesting movement forward.
Indeed. Thank you, Bob. Devin?
And with that innovation, it'll continue to innovate. My only hope for it is that there is an ethical guideline that it will follow. What I really like is I'm a part of the XR Guild, and a lot of what we do, a lot of what we talk about revolves around the ethics around XR in the virtual space in the metaverse. So I hope that there will be able to be some guidelines to be followed. For example, we don't want to end up like the Kryptonians. The Kryptonians put all their faith in. They put all their faith in. Dang, I just had it and I lost my train of thought. Kryptonians. I was being a nerd for a sec, and my nerd failed. Okay.
And there it went.
Waiting on the thing, because it was so snappy. It was awesome. And I totally jinxed it.
Some things aren't. Some things aren't meant to be said, obviously.
Some things aren't meant to be said, but all in all, what it is it's just, for me, I know the technology is getting better. What I've seen so far has been incredible, incredibly scary as well. And just ethically, there just needs to be guidelines, and hopefully those can be followed and adhered to. Otherwise, it can go either way. It can go drastically great, and we get pushed into a utopian society, or it could be drastically terrible, and we go to a dystopian society. But like I said, the Kryptonians put all their faith in Brainiac, and Brainiac ended up being their undoing because he knew that Krypton was going to explode, but wanted to save himself and kill off the whole race. Luckily, Superman was able to survive. But that's the example I was trying to use earlier, but I forgot Brainiac's name.
It's a very powerful example, and it's very authentic, relatable. But I tell you what, with how uncertain the future is, it certainly is better with you both and others in the GatherVerse community involved. Thank you, Devin, Baldwin, and Bob Selko, for your time.